The comfort trap. There is a question most people never ask themselves. Not because it is difficult, but because answering it would require honesty. That question is this: at what point does help stop helping? Modern culture treats support as an unquestioned good. More help. More guidance. More reassurance. More systems designed to catch you before you fall. And on the surface, this appears compassionate. But psychology does not care about intention. It cares about outcomes. And the outcome of constant support is not strength. It is dependence. The soft erosion no one notices. Dependence does not arrive dramatically. It does not announce itself as weakness. It does not feel like collapse. It feels like relief. Someone explains what to do. Someone reassures you that you're on the right path. Someone steps in before failure fully arrives. And because the immediate discomfort is removed, the mind learns something subtle. I do not need to fully figure this out. This is the beginning of erosion. Not of intelligence. Not of talent. But of decision-making authority. Each time support intervenes too early, the brain loses an opportunity to calibrate itself against reality. And calibration is how competence is formed. Why competence cannot be given. Competence is not information. You can be told what to do and still freeze when it matters. You can be taught theory and still hesitate under pressure. Because competence is not knowledge. It is earned confidence. Confidence that comes from making a decision without guarantees. Bearing the consequences. Adjusting. Trying again. This cycle cannot be outsourced. The moment someone else carries it for you, your nervous system never learns to hold the weight. The illusion of safety. Support systems create a powerful illusion. That safety produces growth. But psychology shows the opposite. Growth is produced by manageable risk, not protection. When outcomes are softened, when consequences are diluted, when mistakes are intercepted, the brain never completes the learning loop. No error signal. No correction. No internal authority. Only reassurance. And reassurance does not teach. Dependence and delayed action. One of the least discussed effects of constant help is hesitation. People who are used to support do not move decisively. They check. They ask. They wait. They seek alignment. Not because they are cautious. But because they have learned that action is not final. Someone will adjust it later. Someone will fix it. Someone will catch them. So urgency disappears. And without urgency, progress slows to a crawl. Machiavelli's unspoken lesson. Machiavelli understood something modern psychology confirms. Power belongs to those who do not require intervention. A ruler who must constantly rely on allies is weak. A leader who needs reassurance from the crowd is unstable. The same principle applies internally. The more psychological assistance you require to function, the less authority you possess over your own actions. This is not cruelty. It is mechanics. Why help feels good, and that's the problem. Help triggers relief. Relief tells the nervous system. Threat resolved. But competence requires exposure to threat. Followed by survival. Not rescue. When relief arrives too soon, the system never adapts. This is why people who are constantly supported often feel anxious when alone. Uncertain without guidance. Overwhelmed by independent responsibility. Their nervous system was never trained. The dependency loop. Here is the loop, simplified. 1. Difficulty appears. 2. Support intervenes. 3. Discomfort disappears. 4. Learning is interrupted. 5. Confidence does not form. 6. Next difficulty feels larger. 7. More support is required. Over time, the person appears functional. But only within the support structure. Remove it, and everything collapses. This is not resilience. This is scaffolding mistaken for strength. Why struggle is irreplaceable? Struggle is not romantic. It is inefficient. It is uncomfortable. It is slow. But it is the only environment where self-trust forms. Because struggle forces decisions without guarantees. And each time you survive one of those decisions, something changes. You stop asking, "Will this work?" and start asking, "What will I do if it doesn't?" That shift is competence. The quiet fear beneath dependence. Many people cling to support not because they are incapable, but because they are afraid to discover what they can't do yet. Struggle exposes gaps. Help hides them. And hidden gaps feel safer. But they grow. A dangerous trade. Modern support culture makes a silent trade. Comfort in exchange for capability. Short-term relief in exchange for long-term authority. And once this trade is accepted, reversing it feels terrifying. Because now, independence feels like danger. The first realization. At some point, if you pay attention, a realization arrives. I am supported, but not strong. This is a painful moment. Because it means acknowledging that help protected you from becoming who you needed to be. The beginning of reversal. The reversal does not begin with rejecting all help. It begins with withholding intervention from yourself. Letting decisions stand. Letting mistakes hurt. Letting discomfort teach. Not recklessly. Deliberately. The cost of avoided struggle. Every avoided struggle returns later with interest. In the form of fragile confidence, chronic doubt, fear of independence, inability to act without reassurance. These are not personality traits. They are learned responses. The question that changes everything. Eventually, one question must be faced. Am I being supported, or being trained to be dependent? Most people never ask this. Because the answer demands responsibility. Competence is not built by being protected from failure. It is built by surviving it. And until this is understood, help will continue to quietly destroy the very strength it claims to offer. 2. How support rewrites the brain. There is a misunderstanding at the center of modern psychology. A comforting one. A dangerous one. The belief that safety is the foundation of growth. It sounds reasonable. It sounds humane. It sounds progressive. But the brain does not grow through safety. It grows through adaptive stress. And when stress is systematically removed, the brain does not relax into strength. It reorganizes itself around avoidance. The brain is a prediction machine. Your brain is not designed to make you happy. It is designed to keep you alive. To do this, it constantly predicts outcomes based on past experience. What happened last time I felt this? What followed that decision? What does this situation usually cost me? This predictive function is how confidence is formed. Not through affirmation. Not through explanation. Through evidence. And evidence only comes from exposure. What constant support teaches the nervous system? When help arrives early and often, the brain learns a specific lesson. I am not required to resolve this on my own. At first, this feels like relief. But the brain does not register intent. It registers patterns. And the pattern becomes clear. Discomfort, intervention, relief. Over time, the nervous system begins to expect rescue. And expectation changes behavior. Learned helplessness, rebranded. Psychology has long known about learned helplessness. When organisms experience outcomes they cannot control, they stop trying. But modern dependence is different. It is not learned helplessness through punishment. It is learned passivity through protection. Nothing terrible happens. Nothing dramatic fails. But nothing solid forms either. The person becomes functional only under supervision. Capable only within systems designed to assist them. Why anxiety increases when support increases. This is one of the great paradoxes of the modern era. As support systems expand, anxiety rises. This confuses people. They assume anxiety means something is wrong with them. But anxiety is not always pathology. Sometimes it is miscalibration. The nervous system is asking a simple question. Can I handle this? If the answer has always been outsourced, anxiety has no data. So it fills the gap with fear. The missing stress signal. In a healthy learning loop, stress appears briefly. The system is challenged. The system adapts. Stress resolves. But when stress is removed before adaptation occurs, the loop breaks. No adaptation. No internal update. Just temporary calm. This is why reassurance fades quickly. Because it does not change the underlying prediction. Safety without mastery creates fragility. True safety comes after mastery. Not before. When safety is given without earned competence, the nervous system becomes brittle. Small challenges feel large. Uncertainty feels threatening. Autonomy feels overwhelming. Not because the person is weak. But because the brain was never trained to tolerate load. The infantilization effect. Constant support does something subtle to identity. It shifts the internal posture from I am responsible to someone will step in. This is not conscious. It is embodied. The shoulders relax too early. The mind hesitates. The initiative delays. Over time, adulthood becomes performative. Roles are filled. Tasks are completed. But internally, authority never fully transfers. Why explanation replaces experience. Modern support systems love explanation. Why you feel this way. Why this is hard. Why this makes sense. Explanation feels empowering. But explanation is not integration. You can understand fear perfectly. And still freeze when it arrives. Because the brain does not update through language alone. It updates through survival. Why explanation replaces experience. Modern support systems love explanation. Why you feel this way. Why this is hard. Why this makes sense. Explanation feels empowering. But explanation is not integration. You can understand fear perfectly. And still freeze when it arrives. Because the brain does not update through language alone. It updates through survival. The comfort ceiling. There is a level of comfort beyond which growth stops. Below it, stress is manageable. Above it, stress is avoided. Modern environments are engineered to keep people above this ceiling. Which means adaptation never occurs. This is not malicious. It is simply unintended. Why independent thought declines. Decision-making is a muscle. Use it, it strengthens. Avoid it, it weakens. When support systems provide checklists, protocols, consensus, validation, the individual no longer needs to decide. They need only comply. Over time, independent judgment atrophies. And with it, confidence. Borrowed certainty versus internal authority. Support often provides certainty. But it is borrowed. It comes from experts, institutions, communities. Borrowed certainty feels stable, until it disappears. Internal authority is different. It survives disagreement. It tolerates doubt. It acts without permission. And it only forms through unsupported decisions. The dopamine trap of reassurance. Reassurance releases dopamine. A small hit of relief. A sense of being okay. But like all dopamine loops, tolerance builds. Soon, reassurance must be repeated. And without it, discomfort spikes. This is how emotional dependency forms. Not through weakness, but through conditioning. Why independence feels like anxiety at first. When someone steps away from constant support, anxiety rises. This is often misinterpreted as danger. But it is simply the nervous system encountering novel responsibility. The brain says, "This is unfamiliar. I need data." And data only comes from staying, not escaping. The relearning phase. At first, independent action feels clumsy. Decisions take longer. Mistakes feel heavier. Doubt is louder. This is not regression. It is recalibration. The brain is rebuilding its predictive models. Why most people quit too early. Many people attempt independence, briefly. They feel anxious. They feel uncertain. They return to support. And conclude. See? I can't do this alone. But this is a misread. They didn't fail. They withdrew before adaptation completed. The time factor no one talks about. Competence takes time. Longer than reassurance. Longer than explanation. And modern systems are impatient. They want immediate relief. But relief and growth are not aligned timelines. The internal shift that marks real change. Eventually, something subtle happens. Anxiety still appears. But it no longer controls behavior. Decisions still carry risk. But paralysis fades. The person begins to trust process over outcome. This is internal authority forming. The cost of never rewiring. If the brain is never allowed to recalibrate through struggle, a ceiling remains. Life becomes something to manage, not master. Challenges feel personal. Pressure feels unfair. Responsibility feels heavy. Not because life is cruel, but because the nervous system was undertrained. Support changes the brain. Not because help is bad, but because timing matters. When help arrives too early, the brain never learns that it can survive. And survival is the foundation of confidence. 3. Borrowed certainty and the death of authority. There is another quiet shift that happens when dependence becomes normal. It is not emotional. It is not dramatic. It is epistemic. A shift in how people know what they know. Information has replaced judgment. Modern individuals are surrounded by information. Advice. Frameworks. Explanations. Step-by-step guides. Never in history have people known so much about psychology, productivity, relationships, trauma, motivation. And yet, decision paralysis is everywhere. This is not accidental. Because information does not produce authority. Judgment does. The externalization of knowing. In older models of life, knowledge was local. You learned by doing. You learned by failing. You learned by watching consequences unfold. Knowledge lived inside the body. Modern systems relocate knowledge outward. The answer is online. The expert is elsewhere. The permission must be granted. This creates a subtle dependency. I will act once I am certain. But certainty never arrives. Because certainty is not a prerequisite for action. It is the result of it. Why people feel informed but insecure. Many people can explain their problems flawlessly. They know why they procrastinate. Why they feel anxious. Why they struggle to decide. But when action is required, they freeze. This is not hypocrisy. It is misaligned learning. They have cognitive maps without experiential terrain. They know the theory of the mountain, but have never climbed it. Borrowed authority is always fragile. When certainty comes from outside sources, it has an expiration date. What happens when experts disagree? Advice contradicts itself? Consensus shifts? Trends reverse? The individual collapses inward. Not because they are incapable, but because authority was never internalized. They were renting certainty, not owning it. The hidden cost of best practices. Best practices sound responsible. They promise optimization. They promise safety. They promise reduced error. But they also remove ownership. If something fails, the mind says, I followed the rules. Responsibility dissolves. And without responsibility, authority never forms. The tyranny of consensus. Modern dependence often hides behind collaboration. Ask others. Poll the group. Check what people think. This feels democratic. But psychologically, it erodes decision-making. Because the self never commits fully. It waits. Consensus becomes a shield against discomfort. Why independent thinkers feel anxious. People who try to think independently often feel destabilized. They are no longer protected by shared opinion, social validation, collective certainty. This anxiety is often mistaken for error. But it is simply exposure. The nervous system is encountering unshared responsibility. Authority is a burden before it is power. Being your own authority feels heavy at first. There is no one to blame. No one to defer to. No one to hide behind. Mistakes land fully. This weight is why many people unconsciously avoid authority. Dependence is lighter. Why systems prefer dependent individuals. This part is uncomfortable, but necessary. Dependent individuals are easier to manage. They wait for instructions. Seek approval. Outsource judgment. Avoid unilateral action. This is not conspiracy. It is structural. Systems optimize for predictability. Independent judgment introduces variance. The moralization of dependency. Dependence is often framed as virtue. Needing help is praised. Self-reliance is questioned. Autonomy is reframed as arrogance. This moral framing keeps dependence socially acceptable. Even admirable. But morality and psychology are not the same. What feels kind may still weaken. The loss of strategic thinking. Strategy requires solitude. It requires time without input. Time without consensus. Time without reassurance. Modern people rarely experience this. Their thinking is constantly interrupted. Notifications. Opinions. Feedback loops. Strategy dissolves into reaction. Why people ask, is this normal? This question reveals everything. Not. Is this right? Not. Is this aligned? But. Am I allowed to feel this? Normalcy replaces judgment. Belonging replaces truth. The emotional cost of borrowed certainty. Borrowed certainty must be refreshed constantly. This creates anxiety when disconnected, panic during disagreement, collapse during uncertainty. Internal authority is quieter, but it is stable. How authority is actually built. Authority is not confidence. It is not charisma. It is memory. Memory of deciding without guidance. Enduring uncertainty. surviving mistakes, adapting afterward. Each unsupported decision adds weight. Each endured consequence strengthens posture. Why explanation feels safer than action. Explanation creates the illusion of progress. You feel smarter. You feel seen. You feel validated. But nothing is risked. Action risks identity. Failure exposes the self. This is why explanation is preferred. The transition point most people avoid. There is a moment when a person must choose. Continue seeking certainty. Or act without it. This moment feels irresponsible. But it is necessary. Authority is born here. Why most people stay stuck? They wait for clarity, permission, alignment, confidence. None of which arrive beforehand. They arrive after action. The internal voice shift. Eventually, a change occurs. The voice that asks, "What should I do?" becomes, "What will I do?" This is not arrogance. It is ownership. Dependence does not just weaken emotion. It weakens judgment. And without judgment, no amount of information creates power. 4. Why struggle is the only teacher. And why modern life is designed to eliminate it. There is a truth that modern systems avoid saying out loud. Not because it is false. But because it is uncomfortable. Struggle is not a flaw in development. It is the mechanism of it. When struggle disappears, growth does not accelerate. It stalls. The ancient role of difficulty. For most of human history, difficulty was not optional. Cold, hunger, uncertainty, conflict, isolation. These were not metaphors. They were conditions. And because of this, competence was non-negotiable. You learned because you had to. You adapted because you must. You endured because there was no alternative. This did not make life pleasant. But it made people capable. Why the brain respects difficulty. The brain prioritizes what threatens survival. If something is hard but optional, the brain ignores it. If something is hard and unavoidable, the brain adapts. This is why forced responsibility creates strength faster than encouragement ever could. Struggle sends a clear signal. This matters. Support often sends a different one. This will be handled for you. The error of comfort-first design. Modern systems are built around comfort. Reduce friction. Remove pain points. Eliminate stress. Again, this is not evil. But it misunderstands development. Because development requires productive discomfort. When discomfort is engineered out, learning becomes abstract. People understand challenges. They don't embody solutions. Why simulated struggle doesn't work. Modern life offers safe struggle. Gamified challenges. Motivational exercises. Temporary discomfort. But the brain knows the difference. Real struggle has consequences. Simulated struggle has exits. You can quit. You can opt out. You can be rescued. The nervous system does not recalibrate under these conditions. Consequence is the teacher. Struggle teaches through consequence. You decide. You fail. Something costs you. You adapt. Support often interrupts this loop. It cushions the fall. Explains the outcome. Softens the impact. And in doing so, removes the lesson. Why pain must be felt to teach. Pain is data. It marks boundaries. It encodes memory. It prioritizes learning. Pain that is avoided is pain that returns later, unprocessed. This is why delayed pain often feels worse. Because it arrives without preparation. The myth of gentle growth. There is a popular belief that growth should feel safe, slow, and affirming. But this confuses healing with strengthening. Healing restores baseline. Strength exceeds it. Strength requires overload. Why people feel betrayed by adulthood. Many people reach adulthood unprepared. They were supported, guided, protected. Then responsibility arrives suddenly. Bills, decisions, loss, pressure. And they feel betrayed. Not by life, but by the absence of prior strain. They were never trained. Struggle builds pattern recognition. When you struggle alone, you learn patterns. What breaks you? What doesn't? What matters? What is noise? Support often obscures these patterns. It adds interpretation. Reframes meaning. Dilutes clarity. Why endurance creates calm. People who have struggled deeply often appear calmer. Not because life is easier for them, but because they have already endured worse. Their nervous system trusts itself. The cost of premature relief. Relief feels good. But relief before adaptation creates fragility. The system relaxes without strengthening. This is why people regress under stress. They were never conditioned to carry it. Why struggle produces self-respect. Self-respect is not a belief. It is an outcome. It emerges after. I didn't know if I could handle this, but I did. Support can produce gratitude. But only struggle produces respect. The modern fear of letting people fail. Failure is treated as trauma. As damage. As something to prevent at all costs. But failure is not the enemy. Unprocessed failure is. Failure without responsibility is harmful. Failure with ownership is transformative. Why struggle cannot be outsourced. You can outsource labor. You can outsource advice. You cannot outsource adaptation. Your nervous system must experience the load. No one can carry it for you. The false compassion trap. Sometimes help is offered not because it is needed, but because witnessing struggle is uncomfortable. Helping soothes the helper, but it may rob the struggler. Why people avoid struggle voluntarily. Struggle threatens identity. It risks exposure. It risks failure. It risks shame. Support protects identity. It allows the self-image to remain intact. This is why struggle is avoided even when it is necessary. The role of solitude in struggle. Struggle is most instructive when witnessed by no one. No audience. No validation. No interpretation. Just consequence and response. This is where identity hardens. Why modern life prevents this stage. Constant connectivity. Immediate feedback. Endless commentary. Struggle is never allowed to fully occur. It is interrupted. Explained. Shared. Diluted. The people who seem naturally strong. They are not special. They were not spared. They endured periods without rescue. And their nervous system learned. The uncomfortable question. Ask yourself honestly. What difficulty have I endured without being rescued? The answer predicts your confidence. Support can stabilize. But only struggle teaches. And a life without struggle may feel safe. But it produces adults who are untested. 5. Reintroducing struggle without breaking yourself. How competence is rebuilt in a world that resists it. There is a final mistake people make when they finally see the problem. They swing to the opposite extreme. They reject all support. They glorify suffering. They confuse harshness with strength. This is not maturity. This is reaction. True competence is not built by cruelty. It is built by calibrated exposure. The difference between struggle and damage. Struggle strengthens when it is voluntary, bounded, owned. Damage occurs when struggle is overwhelming, chaotic, inescapable. The goal is not to suffer. The goal is to train capacity. Why modern people need intentional friction? Because friction no longer arrives naturally. Life is optimized. Comfort is default. Escape is immediate. So struggle must be designed. Not dramatically. Not heroically. Quietly. The principle of delayed support. The most powerful rule is simple. Do not remove discomfort immediately. Pause. Let the nervous system attempt resolution. Only intervene if collapse is imminent. This single delay allows adaptation to begin. Choosing solitude as training. Solitude is no longer forced. Which means it must be chosen. Time without input. Time without reassurance. Time without explanation. At first, this feels empty. Then uncomfortable. Then clarifying. Then stabilizing. This is where internal authority grows. Making decisions without consultation. Start small. Low-stakes decisions. No polling. No consensus. No validation. Decide. Act. Observe. Confidence builds through repetition. Letting consequences land. Do not immediately reframe failure. Do not rush to meaning. Let disappointment register. Pain that is fully felt does not linger. It integrates. Rebuilding the decision loop. The loop is simple. Decide, act, experience, adjust. Modern support interrupts this loop. You must protect it. Why discomfort should be specific. Vague suffering exhausts. Targeted discomfort trains. Choose challenges with clear boundaries. Clear stakes. Clear feedback. This teaches the nervous system efficiently. Reducing emotional handrails. Notice where you habitually seek reassurance. Pause before doing so. Ask. What happens if I carry this alone? Often, nothing breaks. Something strengthens. The shift from avoidance to tolerance. Strength is not fearlessness. It is tolerance. The ability to remain present under load. This tolerance accumulates. Why this feels lonely at first? Because you are no longer outsourcing authority. This creates a temporary void. That void is the space where self-trust forms. The return of calm. Eventually, something changes. You stop needing reassurance. You stop needing permission. You stop needing explanation. Not because you know everything, but because you trust your capacity to respond. Support reframed. Support is not removed. It is repositioned. Used after effort. After attempt. After adaptation. Support that arrives late strengthens. Support that arrives early weakens. The final integration. True strength is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not perform. It does not convince. It simply acts. Why this path is rare? Because it is uncomfortable. Because it is lonely. Because it offers no applause. But it offers something else. Stability. The last truth. No one coming to save you is not abandonment. It is an invitation. An invitation to stand. Closing. If you feel weaker despite being supported, there is nothing wrong with you. You may simply be undertrained. And the moment you stop being rescued is the moment you begin to trust yourself.